In today's video, we are going to talk about anger. Anger is a very powerful emotion, and my intention creating this video is to support you understand more about this experience of anger, this powerful emotion. And beyond just understanding it within yourself, learning to recognize what might be going on in someone else's body when they are caught up in anger. I wanted to create this video in this beautiful location. You might be able to hear the river behind me. The scenery's quite magnificent behind me. Very blessed to be in this beautiful spot, and I couldn't think of a better spot because I want this video to be a resource, something you come back to, and hopefully it supports you feel a sense of calm, and hopefully it supports you regulate yourself a little bit better to start using this energy in a productive way. I want to start off talking about having compassion for yourself if you have been experiencing a lot of anger. As I say quite often in my presentations, many of us didn't grow up with childhood psychologists as parents. Many of us weren't taught to regulate. Many of us weren't taught to understand what's going on, how to use this powerful energy. And so if you are a big person, an adult who is, you might have a family, you might have a business, you might be someone who's out there in the world making strides, but you've got this dark side, which is this anger that you've been carrying around. Let's start with having a bit of compassion for the fact that maybe you truly do not understand how this emotion essentially works within yourself, and you might not have ever been taught how to process it and use it in healthy ways. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nash Mackey. I'm a breakthrough coach to high performers. A huge portion of the work I do is training people on developing greater emotional intelligence to understand what's going on, what are the signals when these emotions present themselves, and how to move through them, and when it's time to stop and actually process emotion versus maybe use that emotion to get into greater action. We're all on a unique journey, and the fact that you're here watching this video tells me that you're someone who wants to improve. And I think that's very important to acknowledge about yourself. You are someone who wants to improve. You could be off just saying, hey, I'm an angry person, I can't change that, this is my fate, and just succumbing to that. I have seen people do that. Now, I wanted to create this video as a resource as well because I've seen some beautiful people who have, most often they come to me once they have made a decision under the influence of anger in this case. Certainly I've worked with individuals who have made decisions under alcohol, but in this case we're talking about anger, under the influence of anger. So that's an interesting frame of mind to hold as well. You can think about anger almost being like a substance that you are under its influence when it's completely consuming your body. Now, I don't want to sit here and pretend that I'm perfect, by the way. I have been someone who's experienced such high levels of anger when my kids were very young. I remember one moment I was so consumed by anger. It wasn't at them, it wasn't at my family, it was at something I was dealing with as a business owner. It was something around, I can't actually remember what it was exactly, but it was, I was really doing it tough. And regardless of what it was externally, it's important not to blame that. I certainly was at the time. But I wasn't taking control of this emotion. I didn't understand. I didn't get the warning signs, which I'm going to talk about in this video. I didn't get the knock on the door. I was out of tune with myself. And so I didn't get the building warning signs, and then the beast emerged. And in a fit of fury and frustration and rage, I put my hand straight through a plaster wall. Now that might not seem like a big deal to you, but typically I'm a pretty calm guy, I would say, overall, but I've experienced anger as an emotion that has put me in some situations that I'm not proud of, making decisions like that. That was, my family saw that, my kids witnessed that, my wife witnessed that. I had to go to them after and apologize and just actually say, hey, that was not cool. That was not my best self. And just take ownership for the fact that I was out of control. Because if you're doing stuff like that, if you're going and allowing the emotion of anger to cause you to harm, to damage, to default to any kind of destructive behavior, truly you're out of control. And it's important to admit that. I had to. It was humbling, but I had to admit, damn, this thing got hold of me. I was no longer behind the controls. I was at the mercy of the beast. And that's a great frame of mind to hold, because if you say and admit that you are someone who's capable of having this powerful emotion consume you if you're not on guard, then you actually are in reality. You're working with what's real now. It's true that all of us can be consumed by emotions. There's a great quote, and it's in the battle of logic and emotion, emotion always wins. So once you're at a point where emotions have surged so high within you, you've not been getting the little signals from your body, you're not receiving those little subtle nudges from your body, and you're not processing and dealing with them and making sure that you're working on yourself, not just training in a gym like some people think is working on themselves, or just reading the books. You're actually doing like the deep emotional processing work, which is what most people don't do. If you're not doing that, then just like if you don't service your car, don't be surprised when your car breaks down when you're not servicing it. What is actually going on in your body when you experience anger? Let's talk about that, because what's very terrifying for us as humans is when we experience something that we don't understand. That uncertainty doesn't feel great for us at all, and it can actually drive us a little bit crazy. So when we are experiencing something, again, you might be someone who's holding a lot together, you might be a put together person, but then you experience these certain emotional outbursts and you feel like you lose control of everything. That can feel very, very vulnerable and actually cause the emotion to spiral. So what's going on? Let's understand this. So it's important to understand, if we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, that all emotions are, first of all, a chemical reaction. There's some sort of chemical shift happening within you. Okay, so every emotion will cause a change in your chemistry. When you're experiencing emotion, there's a chemical change within yourself. And beyond that, every emotion is feedback. Every emotion has a message for you. And if we develop the emotional intelligence to understand what messages these different emotions that we might default to have for us, then we can receive the message without the emotion having to consume us. What a lot of people miss is the emotion fires up. In other words, your system's trying to give you a message, either to slow down, maybe to speed up, maybe to back off, maybe to communicate something. It's trying to, your system's letting you know something's important. But often when we don't understand that, we just judge it, we resist it, we fight against it, we're like, I should not be feeling this way. And that resistance causes the pressure to build. Every emotion causes a chemical change within you. Every emotion has a message. Every emotion serves a purpose. Big idea here. You never want to get rid of your anger. You never want to get rid of your anger. In fact, I have seen people who have become even more angry trying desperately to get rid of anger. It is not the correct approach. You will not get rid of anger. In fact, you would not want to get rid of anger. Every emotion serves a purpose. Nature does not keep things it doesn't need. It discards them. It's when we judge it, we make it bad, we believe we should not be experiencing it, that we add fuel to the fire, and we then get caught up in it. What we want to learn to do is actually acknowledge, hey, there's a purpose for this emotion. What is the purpose? My job is to get to know it. So there's going to be a time where you do need to pull back. You do need to pull back. One of the greatest metaphors I ever heard was from a mentor of mine. He explained how some emotions, it's a bit like you're driving down the road along a highway, you're driving the car, and then you've got this front seat passenger. The front seat passenger is communicating to you, and some things they're just chit-chatting, sort of like everyday emotions you might be feeling, maybe a little bit of stress, but then you regulate it back down. You might feel a little bit of anxiety, but then you regulate it back down and you come back to a sense of, peacefulness and calm and just more balanced emotion. But then there are some emotions, like having a front seat passenger there, who really wants to share something deep with you. They want to share something very, very deep and profound with you, and you can't drive the car and listen. You're like, hang on, I need to pull over to hear what you've got to say. This is deep, this is big. And so you've got to pull over the car and then hear them out, let them talk, let them process, and then you pull back on the road and you keep going. But the important thing is you do keep going. Some emotions require more attention than others. And initially, when you're doing this kind of work, you might need to be pulling yourself away and pausing for bigger periods of time. And it doesn't take long to regulate emotions. We absolutely want to learn to deal with the primary cause of the emotions. Often we felt anger as a young child, and that's never been processed. And we are, as adults, doing our life, doing our best, but this unprocessed issue as a child that caused this anger to surface within us, to bubble up, that's still at play. There's an unclosed loop in your mind. So if you've been doing a lot of anger intervention in your life, you feel like you're putting out spot fires, it might actually be time for you to go back and do the deep work. Find out, where's that anger coming from? What's actually going on beneath that anger? Because anger is not an isolated emotion. And what I mean by that, it doesn't just come by itself. It comes with other emotions behind it. Anger is usually the manifestation, or the kind of the mask for so much more. Now, if we go one layer deeper here, we want to understand that emotions are energy. Emotions are energy. If we look at you under a microscope, you're a big mass of energy. We're all a mass of energy. And we could go deeper than that, but we're going to leave it at that for now. We're all energy. And this is undeniable. Now, an emotion is an energy in motion. It's a form of energy in motion, emotion. When we resist any emotion, we stop that energy flowing through its natural cycle. The body's capable of processing them. It's just that we stop the body processing them by our judgment of them. As soon as we judge an emotion, it's like we put up this blockade, and the emotion can't move through us effectively and essentially digest within us. That's the way I like to see it, or process within us. And there's many reasons why we'd put up a guard when we feel an emotion. I'm going to talk about that as well. I have come to understand that anger is an expression of a lot of deeper repression. When you understand this, again, when you look at yourself or others, you'll have a higher level of compassion. And compassion is a huge part in overcoming any emotion that we've been consumed by. Compassion puts us in a softer energy, where it's like an acceptance energy. The repression I'm talking about here is often a repression of your needs, something that was important to you that you sacrificed, and so you're angry about that. It's a repression of what you were really feeling, and you repressed it, held it down. That energy did not get processed through your body, and so like a volcano bubbling up, it comes to the surface. It could be a repression of something that's very important to you. As a young kid, I developed a really debilitating skin condition, and it was a skin condition that was really full on as far as how much of my body it covered. And it's something I hid away, and I worked with a specialist some years ago, and we discovered that I developed this very severe skin condition. I was feeling so much anger. I figured that out. And I also realized it was because I was repressing this desire I had to, in my case as a kid, move into this creative endeavor that I had on my heart, which was to direct movies. That was something I really wanted to do as a kid, and that sort of got shut down by certain people around me that because of certain reasons. I don't need to get into that now, but it is what it is. I can't change that. But as a kid, that just naturally happened. I felt extremely angry. Something that was important to me that I'd shared with people around me wasn't able to happen for reasons, but I didn't understand that as a kid. So I just got angry. It never got explained to me properly, the reasons why. I just felt like what was important to me wasn't important, like didn't matter. And so when we have an experience like that, we can shut stuff down, we can trap it in, and that trapped energy manifested as anger. Now, I got an angry rash on my body to communicate the anger I had on the inside. We can experience all sorts of physical breakdowns as a result of repressing anger. We can start to experience joint breakdown. We can start to experience, in my case, skin conditions. Anger is an energy, is a powerful energy, and it's got a lot of heat to it. And so it can cause all sorts of disruption in the body as a result of this built up heat. So if you're experiencing physical symptoms that maybe aren't clearing away with different treatments, it might be worth exploring the emotional component of the physical symptom. And again, if you see other people around you experiencing rashes and things like that, and you can go and research for yourself, this isn't medical advice, you can go and research for yourself skin conditions that manifest as a result of repressed emotions or physical symptoms. There's a whole world of literature on how our physiology and the symptoms we experience within our physiology are a result and essentially communication of something far deeper within us. So I think we're all pretty clear that anger can be an extremely destructive emotion, but we've also just spoken about how anger has something deeper to teach you, to share with you. Straight away knowing that, if you've been experiencing anger, hopefully you're experiencing a bit of softening around this emotion within yourself. Anger predominantly has been accepted as something that's okay to show throughout history as well. So this is another reason why a lot of people default to it. We've spoken about how all emotions are energy. Ideally, we learn to feel our emotions. Some emotions require more attention than others. The more in tune we become with our emotions to the messages of them, the less we need to pull over. We can just hear them, acknowledge them, keep moving on, get the feedback. But anger has been considered a more acceptable emotion. This is something that I've really come to understand and seen in people's lives. So throughout history, predominantly men, and not just men of course, but predominantly men were considered weak if they showed certain emotions, such as sadness, such as maybe some disappointment or frustration. Maybe if they shared what was really going on for them, it was considered a weakness. And men, women, this is often family specific, culture specific, but it's been throughout history that anger has been considered a more acceptable emotion. Now, anger is very interesting because often when we hear someone who's very angry, we listen to them. So often in families, a parent will get really angry and the kids will listen to them. And so this has been entrained within us. Often in a workplace, there's certain people who are higher up and they use anger because it's the best they know how to do. They use anger to essentially take control. And it might get you so far, but it's not going to get you as far as you could go ultimately. Anger has a very high price tag. You can think of anger as a very expensive fuel that you're burning. It comes at a cost. We don't want to get rid of our anger, as we've spoken about. We want to have the ability to get angry and actually use that in very healthy ways when it's required. But we don't want that anger to become something that we default to either control or get our way or get ahead in life. It's not sustainable. Anger is a big emotion that makes us feel powerful. And you might ask yourself, well, why would someone need to feel that powerful? and have that much energy moving through them? Well, it's most often because they've been feeling incredibly powerless. So often anger is a compensation for a sense of a deep sense of powerlessness. You see someone who's showing their anger. I think back to that moment in time I shared where I put my fist through a wall. I felt powerless. There were things going on in my business that I felt were out of my control, that I thought shouldn't have been the way they were. I felt powerless to change anything. And so my system wanted to get a temporary hit of power, of control. And so that's often where we default to this powerful energy, but we don't know how to use it. It's too much for us to hold, and so we do something stupid with it. Now, we can, again, through awareness and through understanding, entrain our systems to, first of all, not go to such an extreme with anger, but to recognize it when it's coming up, and then use that energy more productively. So understand that it's a defensive energy. It's, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to take abrasive action, where you're in a fight or flight response and you are ready to take big action. You're ready to get something big done. And again, that can be great if that's channeled. But when it's out of control, when it's then maybe amplified with things like alcohol and other stimulants, it can be very, very destructive. So the extreme of anger is often a compensation for another extreme we've been in, where we've been feeling powerless. Another reason why we experience anger, almost always behind anger, is a deep sense of hurt. It's something that you might have experienced that you've never been able to communicate, share, put into words. And again, it's pent up energy. It's pent up in your system, and it manifests as angry outbursts. You're snappy. You're often frustrated. You're often just feeling this deep sense of maybe even fury at the world. Maybe to people you've never even met. Maybe toward life's events. Maybe even to devices. Maybe your computer. You're yelling and screaming at your computer. And this stuff really happens for people. And all of that, again, become aware of it. Hopefully this video is really expanding your mind around the different ways anger presents itself, manifests in your life. So you can realize, yeah, okay, I'm dealing with some anger here. I've got some real anger issues. And again, not a bad thing if I deal with it. Could be if I don't. That's what I would love for you to get from this video. So I know I'm going broad, but I want to give you the most broad perspective I possibly can in the time we have to fully understand this. Understanding leads to a sense of power. So you can experience anger as a compensation or an expression of deep, deep hurt. You can also experience anger when you felt, once again, something that was very important to you got disrespected, or you had something as a standard in place that was not honored by other people. So maybe someone crossed a boundary with you physically. Maybe they did it mentally, or in some other dimension of life where you had something as important to you. Maybe it was a project that somehow got destroyed by someone else. I don't know what it is for you, but very often anger comes as a result of having something that's very important to us, be it a standard we have for ourselves, or boundary, as some people say, that got crossed, that got disrespected. It led to us feeling a sense of powerlessness within ourselves, and that powerlessness then got too much for us to bear, so we wanted to get out of that powerlessness. How do we feel incredibly powerful? Well, let's get angry, let's get big. It's a big, loud emotion. You take up space, people pay attention. Maybe that's something else that you want to consider if you're experiencing anger. Maybe you did not get heard until you dropped into anger as a kid. This is very, very common for clients, I've noticed. They have entrained themselves into anger because When they were sad, mum and dad didn't listen. When they were naughty, mum and dad punished them. But finally, when they realized they could get angry, and everyone stopped and listened, and then maybe they developed a bit of strength, maybe in their teenage years, and then, my goodness, did everyone listen. So they found a way to meet some needs, and they're carrying that pattern out as an adult. But now they're at a point where they're like, this is not sustainable. I can't keep doing this. Someone's going to get hurt. I'm going to get myself in a really tough situation. So there's so many different reasons why we can be experiencing it. But I wanted to give you some of the core reasons behind why we do experience anger. But please understand, every emotion serves a purpose. What we resist will persist. If you resist anger, if you judge it, if you try and stuff it down, then it's going to only get stronger. Now, the message we spoke about could be that when you experience anger, maybe it is time for you to stand up for yourself. Maybe it is time for you to communicate a standard that you are now holding for yourself. Maybe it is time for you to value yourself more. Maybe it is time for you to honor what's important to you and stop repressing what's inspiring to you in life. When there's stuff that really lights you up, but you're conforming to the people around you and not actually being true to yourself. Like, you'll never get far. You'll get somewhere maybe, but you might get some acceptance, temporary acceptance from the people around you, but ultimately you'll betray yourself, and that can lead to deep, deep anger. So it's worth, in everything I've shared, actually identifying, where do you feel like this anger is coming from? Honestly, what made you really angry as a kid? What made you sad as a kid? Where did you feel that maybe something was important to you and it got disrespected? It wasn't honored. It was overlooked. It was pushed aside. Identifying that. And again, we can't go back and change it, but what we can do is just notice, oh my goodness, this is still stemming from all that experience I had back then, or that particular experience back then. Maybe it's an accumulation of things. So you can just go straight in. This is now the practical side of things. You can go straight in and identify what's made you most angry in the past. From the earliest memory you can possibly recall all the way to now. What's made you feel incredibly hopeless or helpless in the past? Go back and look at that. What's made you feel like what was important to you was somehow overlooked by other people? A boundary, a standard, something that you had created. Again, we spoke about that. Go back and look at that and start identifying those key points and bring them to awareness. And then start moving through that. Allow yourself to feel whatever presents itself in your body as you recall these memories. Just allow it to present itself. That's a very entry-level practice anyone can do, and if that's too much for you, then go and find someone who can support you with that. There's many more layers to it, but this video is more about giving you a deep understanding of what anger is, of the power of anger really, because if you think about all that energy that's available to maybe put your fist through a wall or do something that's unproductive, imagine if you channeled that to something more productive. And that leads me to our next point. Start doing something, start an activity. If you're someone who's experiencing a lot of anger, I would encourage you to possibly explore doing things that cool your system down. Maybe hydration is a little more important to you. Maybe eating foods that are a little more cooling as opposed to heating. There's probably something to be said for that. You want to reduce heat in your body, but you also want to find a way to express this energy, express more energy, but in really healthy ways. So that might be through joining a martial arts gym. It might be through doing some creative projects such as a form of art, sculpting, wood carving, whatever it is for you, pottery making. But find something creative that you love to do and do it with other people ideally. So that's now an expression of energy. We want to stop repressing. We want to stop repressing that energy and have it burst out of us in unproductive ways. Now, in addition to that, it's very important to stop identifying as an angry person. Please stop saying that you came from an angry family and therefore you are an angry person. This is very detrimental to your progression in life. Affirming to yourself that you are somehow handcuffed to anger because of what the people did around you, who they were, how they were, and believing that it's your destiny, well, nothing could be further from the truth unless you are actually believing it and making that a reality for yourself. I saw a lot of anger as I grew up in people around me, and I took it on board. I saw that as a vehicle to express my emotions. But if you can realize that you are a sovereign being, you are a unique individual, you came from societies, through societies, from parents, through parents, from families, through families, but you do not belong to them. You get to stand on your own 2 feet. You get to decide, hey, what are the emotions I would love to live in more, apart from anger? And then process whatever's been pent up in your system that's causing these outbursts of energy and anger. And then process that, and then choose these new emotions. And then guess what? You actually practice them. You practice them just like you would practice juggling if you wanted to learn the skill of juggling. You actually practice embodying new emotions, and you entrain yourself into those. Now, it's very important, again, if you're experiencing high levels of anger, to extinguish it as quickly as possible. This is not something you want to deal with. And if you do the primary work on dealing with anger, it can save you, again, it can save you divorces, it can save you business collapse, it can save you health breakdown. There is so much to be said for learning how to deal with anger properly. I really pray that this has been a resource that has been insightful to you. I promise you, having been someone who's experienced high levels of anger in my life, it is possible to free yourself from it. Will you ever stop experiencing anger? 100% no. You don't want to. Remember, every emotion serves a purpose. If you can stop and get a message, and literally I would be pulling out a journal and say, hey, what do I know is important to do in this moment? Identify that in that anger, and then go and do that. Go and do that. And then decompress your system from this pent-up energy you might be carrying so you don't have these outbursts. Start working on yourself. I love the quote from Jim Rohn, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Work harder on yourself, reduce those charges, reduce those triggers, and give yourself more bandwidth to deal with life so you're not like a ticking time bomb ready to go off. Anger is a beautiful, powerful emotion. It can be used for creation. Now, I want to end on an important point that I heard from Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL. He was talking about anger, and he was saying how anger at first, when you first feel triggered by something, it's like an initial report, as they call it in the military. An initial report is not usually that accurate. It doesn't hold all the details. So he was a commander in the military, Jocko Willink, and he would get these initial reports that come in. So it might be that there's an attack happening or a situation that's unfolding. They would never act on the initial report. So this is important to understand if you have found yourself to be someone who just triggered like that. Never take action when you're too high or too low in an emotion. This is something my mum taught me growing up. I was named after a saint, Saint Ignatius, and my mum used to tell me the story of Saint Ignatius. He used to be a soldier. Apparently he had a really hot temper and he got humbled in life. Long story short, he came up with a quote. He came to the realization, don't do anything, don't make a decision when you're too high or too low. Learn to balance yourself, learn to get the more information than just the initial report. So for example, someone does something that triggers you. Remember, no one can make you feel angry. Anger is within you, but they do something, you feel the trigger, and then you feel the surge of energy. That's an initial report. Go and ask some questions. Go and dig a little deeper. Go and find out a little bit more information. And what happens in just your digging deeper, you get more information. You're like, oh, okay, I see there's more to this than I was initially receiving there. I see the bigger picture now. Your mind opens up a little bit, and you might move into a deeper state of understanding for the situation, and so you decompress your system. So that's very important to understand. Don't do anything when you're too high or too low. Learn to regulate yourself, build practices in your day where you are actually optimizing yourself. You're not being consumed by emotion. You're essentially choosing how to be as opposed to being just in reaction. My friends, there's so much more I could say on this topic. These videos end up being a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I wanted to speak into the different aspects of anger. If you've got any questions about this, please drop them below. I'd love to hear, what are your questions? What are your takeaways? If you have got any value from this video, I would love to hear that below. Share this video out with someone you care about. Share this video out with someone you'd love to support. Just before we wrap up, as a bonus for you watching all this way, I'm going to take you through a very, very quick breathwork practice that you can do to start releasing anger out of your body. And just before we move into this little practice, I would love for you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to this channel. That way you get notified when I upload future content. So, quick practice. Sit up nice and straight. Imagine a piece of string pulling yourself up nice and straight, your spine straightening out. And all I invite you to do right now, as you listen to the beautiful sounds of the water behind me, is to become aware of your breath. Just become aware of your breath. Ideally breathing through your nose if you can. And just notice in your body as you become aware of your breath, where you may have been storing anger in your body, where you might have been holding on to anger. Just without any resistance, just observe this around your body. And anywhere you might have been holding on to anger, be it tension in your neck, be it in your fists, in your legs, in your chest or stomach, in your shoulders, wherever it is, behind your eyes, just breathe into that part of the body where you've been holding any anger. And just use the breath, the softness, the coolness of the breath, to cool that area down in the body. And just imagine a color that represents any anger you've been feeling. As you breathe through your nose, cooling the anger down, see that color changing now to a color that represents an emotion you would love to be experiencing instead of the anger. It might be a sense of peace, calm, love, compassion. And just turn that color up in your body and just focus on that color, breathing it, making that color more vivid. And feeling how when you focus on that color and that emotion in your body, it brings a shift within you. And so we're going to wrap the practice up there for today. Thank you once again for being here. You can find out more about my work below. My name's Nash Mackey. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.